And there's a line in it that's something like, if you want to be a storyteller, sell your labor, not your brain.
Welcome to Pajamas and Wrenches, the podcast where we share warm fuzzies for your creative well and cool tools for your creative challenges. I'm PJ Gardner-Schweitzer, author of the Horace and Bullwinkle series and The Great Zudini from HarperCollins. And this is my friend and brilliant writer.
I'm Sarah Allen. I am the author of 2 contemporary middle grade, One Star Native and Breathing Underwater, and 2 spooky middle grade, The Monster Tree and The Nightmare House.
Such good.
Yay!
All right, Sarah, why don't you start us off this week with your inspiration? What's been inspiring you lately?
Our warm, fuzzy inspiration. So I am finally filling a gap in my reading life. I have taken classes from Brandon Sanderson at BYU, and he was amazing, and I loved him as a teacher, but I have never read any of his books, and I have felt a lot of guilt about that for some reason. I know he's hugely popular. I've admired his career like from a distance and what he's done. So I am finally reading Tress of the Emerald Sea, which I think is not very much like some of his other stuff. Mm-hmm. And I'm not even sure if it's part of the Cosmere. And I think it was one of the 4 secret books that he did for the Kickstarter. But basically, I am madly in love with it. I love it so much. And specifically, I'm almost like, well, I better be careful what other Brandon Sanderson I read, because I know it won't all be like this, but I love it so much. And I even had a friend say that she'd heard that he wrote it for his wife, just as like a side thing. And she was like, this is so amazing, you need to publish it. And so he did. Anyway, what is inspiring me about it is basically the way he's using a narrator. So there is a narrator. It's a blend of first and third person, because someone is telling the story who is a character in the book, but it's not Tress, and it's sort of a side character who you don't see very often. The most similar comparison I can think of is a series of unfortunate events, where it's the 3 orphans. So it's third person mostly, but you have Lemony Snicket himself, like as the narrator writing the story, and he inserts himself occasionally, like, oh, my lovely Beatrice, who,
right.
And I loved that. I don't even know what to call it, that strategy, the trope, the method. I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's a trope. I think it's a trope.
Something.
Okay.
Yeah. I loved it so much when I read Series of Unfortunate Events, and to this day, they're some of my favorite middle grade books. And now I'm loving it again in Tress of the Emerald Sea, which is YA, adult YA. I don't know.
YA crossover, I think, is what.
Yeah, she's 18.
Yeah.
Anyway, and it also is something I have very much been thinking about doing in the middle grade book that I am brainstorming. I haven't started it yet, but I'm the middle grade project that I'm thinking of working on. And I feel like this strategy, this trope, doing it this way, it almost feels like cheating. It almost feels like getting your cake and eating it too, because you get to do all the advantages of both first and third person. Like I love, you get to be snarky and voicey, like the way you do in first person.
Yes.
And you get to insert jokes, and oh my gosh, the puns in this book are killing me. There's a zombie that's like growing an ear on his skin, and he uses the word ear regardless.
I love it. No, I love that. Yeah.
It's hilarious. So you get to do funny things like that with the narrator, and Lemony Snicket does it too. The whole like, oh, you don't want to read this, but like breaking the fourth wall. You get a lot to do.
Yes.
Like that. But you also get to be a third person observer of the actual main character. And I honestly wonder, because they're Tress as a character, she's very sweet and she's doing things almost because she sort of she feels like she has to, but she's not a like gung-ho, I'm gonna go save the world, really you would think of like a typical hero, and it's the same in Lemony Snicket. Like the 3 Baudelaires, they're really interesting, but they're sweet kids, they're just trying to survive. And I almost wonder, like, if you were reading Lord of the Rings and it was like inside Samwise's head, I honestly don't know if it would be as interesting.
Yeah,
Like
I see what
Samwise,
you're saying.
you can
Yeah,
almost appreciate characters like Samwise more from
a distance.
observing them.
Yeah.
Mhm. And so you get that advantage as well.
So, and I wonder if that's be well, one, I mean, I think it's because when you're like first person, when you're in their head, you as the reader have to buy in completely into the character in order to go with it, right? Whereas if it's third person, there's like just enough distance that you don't have to, you know what I mean? Like you don't have to necessarily like everything about him or whatever. And I know
Mhm, mhm.
that's not quite what I'm thinking, but or the right phrase, right? But
Right.
there's enough distance that they can be interesting, but you don't have to be like emotionally as one with them, quote unquote, right?
Yes.
Like, whereas
Yes.
if you do first
Absolutely.
person, if you're in their head, you kind of do.
Yeah. And characters who are like extra tender and sweet, like I don't know why I keep using Samwise as my example, but like you almost he doesn't know how lovable he is.
Hmm.
And it's almost better, like it would almost kind of ruin that effect if you were
Yeah.
in his head.
Yeah.
Like you get to just see him being as completely adorable and lovable as he is.
Yeah.
Um, so you get that with the kids, with Tress, and I honestly I'm falling in love with Tress as a character too because she is so sweet and she's doing like I it's a story where she's kind of winning the small battles just through goodness and
Right.
through trying to be honest and good, and I love that.
I was going to say
But then you get the
that is
snark of the
Sarah. That
first
is so Sarah. Of course you love that. Yes. Go ahead. I'm
yeah.
sorry, I interrupted.
But it would not have the kick and the spice. It might be a little bit
Mhm.
flat if you're just doing that
Yeah.
without that first person hilarious insertion snark, you know.
No, and you're right. Because in the same way that I think it's very hard to write quiet characters,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that's because, and I think the only way to write a quiet character is if they're quiet on the outside, but busy on the inside. But I
Mm-hmm.
don't think that necessarily reads. And I think when people write quiet characters, they're not doing it that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
again, I think if you have a narrator, you can have the quiet character and they're intriguing, they're interesting,
Yes.
but you don't have to be, you're not necessarily finding the emotional connection,
Mm-hmm.
or
Mm-hmm.
that's not the primary connection to the story, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm kind of hoping that that mixing of the two, first and third, will
Mhm.
maybe kind of work with genre too, because the middle grade project that I'm interested in that I'm kind of brainstorming is mixing sort of folklore and fairy tale and contemporary. And so yeah, having sort of the folk tale
Mhm.
be that first person omniscient, but like snarkily inserting themselves. Like, I'm going to tell you the story about these kids the way that Lemony Snicket does. Yeah. Anyway, so and I've been trying to. I've known that this story idea that I have doesn't. I don't want to go solidly one or the other. Like, it's not solidly contemporary, but it's not solidly fairy tale. But
Mhm.
it's very much both of them, you know.
Yeah.
And so I'm kind of wondering if this idea of a narrator that inserts themselves can help me
Yeah.
figure out how to write that kind of story.
Yeah. So you're talking about this, and all of a sudden I thought it's like certain tropes or certain things are like chocolate and peanut butter. They just go perfect, right? And then certain things are like peanut butter and olives or peanut butter and pickles. Have you never had? Oh, okay. If you've never had it, it came out of a book, green olives specifically. Don't do black olives.
Okay.
Not
Okay.
it's not quite right if you do it like that. The Stephanie Plum series by Janet Ivanovich. Eats
Oh,
peanut butter and olive sandwiches. And you try it and you're like,
no, I got to try
or you
that.
hear it and you go, no. And then you try it and you go, well, I don't know, maybe, I think that at least in our minds, some ideas really just seem to make sense together, right? And then some don't, but you have to try it to see if it works. If
Right.
right.
Right. Yeah.
So it's sort of funny we're talking about this because I have a story actually also middle grade where, and I go back and forth on how to do it, but I've always wanted to have the narrator who's reading the story, who's invested in the story as we are as readers. So then something dramatic happens and they're like, oh no, what's going to happen to Joe? Oh
Yes.
no. And that panicky, almost like the movie Princess Bride, right?
Oh,
Where,
yes,
right?
yes.
Because the grandpa knows the story, but the boy doesn't. And there's all those interruptions because he's getting the
Yes.
story right. I've wanted to do that. I just don't know that it works as well in a book as it does cinematically, right? Some things that are literary don't work cinematically, and some things that are cinematic just don't work literally. So,
Sure.
but yeah,
I
I
mean, and
love
that's a
that.
Princess Bride is a great example of like, and I was thinking while you were talking about peanut butter and olives, I'm like maybe like French fries and a Wendy's Frosty, although
Yes.
that's probably more of a common one. But like the story of the kid and the grandpa wouldn't be as strong without the fairy tale story, and the fairy tale story wouldn't be as poignant and what it is without the grandpa
Yeah.
and the grandson, you know?
Yeah.
So
No, actually, that's the exact perfect example of that blend
mhm,
where
mhm,
you
it
really need
is.
the one with the other for it to really be powerful, to be as effective. Yeah. Because
Yeah.
you're right, because the fairy tale story is kind of ridiculous, right? And then the
It's
story of
like
the
the everything but the kitchen sink and then the kitchen sink kind of
yeah.
fairy tale.
Yeah. But then the grandpa and the son, if that's just the story, that's not very exciting, right? Yeah. That's pretty cool. I love that. I love that. That's really cool. I'll tell you what though, what I don't do is I'm not a big fan of unreliable narrators. Like I like the narrator, and I actually I didn't love A Series of Unfortunate Events, but I did love
Really?
the setup. I did love the narrator or yeah, like the in-book
Mhm.
narrator, right? As opposed to sort of like the presumed narrator, which is right, just
Right, right.
right.
I think I'm seduced easily by cleverness and the series of unfortunate events stuff, like this whole narrator and shit, like
Yeah.
it just comes out across to me it's so clever that I
Yes.
just fall in love with
No,
it.
it's funny. I'm a big fan of clever too. I like unusual things. So no, I totally get that. I get that. All right. Well, do we want to move on?
Yes, that's my inspiration this week.
Okay.
What
My
is your challenge? What have you been dealing with?
Well, frankly, my challenge is finances. And because of
Hmm.
that, it's very hard. I don't know. So this is a practical side of being a creative, right? Of being a writer. But
Yes.
I think this would
Yes.
probably be true of anybody who's in the arts, right?
Oh
Which is,
yeah.
right, you're like, how do I just write my books without worrying if they're going to make money so that I can be pure, right? Or do I get a job, right? And cut down on this, but also I'm years old and goddess-sized, and I haven't worked a job like a regular job in a very long time. I don't know, so I find myself sort of
Mhm.
spinning and trying to find ways of making money, but I also have a son who's autistic, so I feel like I have to. I don't have the loosest schedule because I have to be here when he's here,
Right.
right?
Right.
So
That's a whole other can of worms. Parenting as an artist, you know.
yeah.
Anyway, it's all
Well,
part of this.
I will be
The
honest.
practical
Yeah.
side.
I don't know how anyone with little kids writes. I have the most respect for, well, I'm going to say something controversial here. Unless you are you're a dude and you're the primary caregiver, it is easier for men
Then you
to
have someone taking care of the childcare for you.
kids.
Yeah.
And it's not that they don't want to help. You can be a full equal partner. But if mom spends more time with the kids, mom tends to be the emotional hub. So
Mhm.
mom, they come,
Even
dad's
if
there,
mom doesn't spend most time with the kids, sometimes like sometimes it's just naturally mom is the emotional hub.
right?
Like,
Which
yeah.
means that the people don't leave her alone. I've just been going around it, and I do have a coaching business, but Sarah, my strength is like brainstorming and helping people with their stories. But I've been struggling because I'm like, I don't know how to advertise that. I don't know how to pitch that. I think it's extremely useful. And I think a lot
I
of
can
people
vouch for that. Yes, you've been very helpful.
but how do you tell people it's worth this many dollars for you to come just chat with me? But I can genuinely help you. So I just find myself sort of spinning. And because I'm spinning on the money, I'm not writing. I'm not working on the stuff and I'm just frustrated, and that has been my challenge because the fear or the concern about money is stopping me from writing, because you can't really, I wish I were a dude, or because this is more of a dude thing where you can compartmentalize. I am not a compartmentalizer, and everything's connected to everything else. But
Right.
so mostly right now I'm just trying to figure out what to do and that.
Right.
But again, and as we talked about earlier, I think I think the path is always authenticity, right? I think that success comes, and I think this is true in what we write. I think it's true in how we make money, that that sincerity and authenticity are what appeal to people, and we talked about, I think we've talked about, I don't know if it was on the podcast before, but do you remember the guy? I think he was Native American, and it was on TikTok, but I think it kind of went viral everywhere. And he was like on a skateboard holding onto the back of a truck. Do you remember this? And he's skateboarding.
Oh,
and
you
he's
were the one that showed these to me. Yes.
Right. Okay. Yeah. And he's drinking cranberry juice and a Fleetwood Mac song
Yeah.
is playing in it, right? And he looks at the right, and he does this, and I was like, and then it went viral, and like cranberry, whoever does the cranberry juice, like bottom of truck, you know what I mean? I mean, like, right, that's just because it went viral and stuff. And I was like, you could not plan that. Nobody was like, what's going to go viral if you if you drink
Yes.
cranberry juice and this,
Yes.
and I think it's because it was so very real to him. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. It was just like, this is what I'm doing.
Yeah.
It's me. And honestly, even with the books that we're writing, we can't, like, I remember, I can't remember who wrote Eats, Shoots, and Leaves. Was it Elizabeth Tress? Something? I can't remember.
I can't think of it, but
But
yeah,
I saw an interview with her.
Yeah.
Yeah. I saw an interview with her where she was like, yeah, nobody was thinking a book about grammar is going to be a New York Times bestseller, like a runaway hit. But it was like, it just, because she was so herself in that book, and she was so witty and funny. But you're exactly right. Like, we don't know what's gonna hit.
Yeah. And that's how it goes, right? Like, like we but it's also the motivation to be just to be your whole self as much as possible.
Right.
And honestly, when people get canceled, like, I think this is right, is because they've created a persona that isn't real, and then they get found out, right? And you're like, oh, that was never true, and then people feel lied to. Whereas, like, I mean, I'm a hot mess, I own it, and I'm going to share my hot mess with you, and I think people enjoy that. I don't know if they enjoy it, but they relate to it. I mean, enjoy.
Yes, all the things. And okay, what you're saying about the practical concerns being a sort of impediment to creativity. Honestly, this whole conversation is making me think of Big Magic by Elizabeth Gilbert.
Yeah.
Have you read that one?
I have, but not in a while. And I was just thinking, I think I have it in a bookshelf over here that I should get that out and reread that.
Yeah. Whenever I'm feeling that exact thing, because I most definitely feel it all the time. Oh, and hello, here's my kitty. She has a part in there about exactly this, and about how she had multiple bestsellers and was very secure in her writing income before she ever felt secure enough to quit her day job. And even then she was like, I hope, she did it very thoughtfully and carefully. And she talks about how about the difference between asking your creativity to support you versus you working to support your creativity, basically. And there's no easy answer there, but I just, that dichotomy helped me understand things a lot. And now I honestly recommend to writers to have a day job. There's even a line in, I swear, the way in Tress of the Emerald Sea, the Brandon Sanderson book I'm reading, he's so inserting himself in this, I think, because there's a whole line about how she's scrubbing decks on the ship, and it goes on this whole tangent about how the deck scrubbing was way better for her thinking and creativity than it would have been if she had a job that required her brain. And there's a line in it that's something like, if you want to be a storyteller, sell your labor, not your brain. You know, anyway.
Oh, no, that's actually brilliant. That's
So
actually
it's like,
brilliant.
yeah,
Yeah.
I was like, you know what? That is very true. I've definitely had jobs where I come home and I'm just like, all right, my brain is done. All I can think
Yeah.
about right now is sitting on the couch with my drink, watching a show. Yeah.
And
But
I also, yeah.
it's hard to figure out for each individual, like what does that look like of how to support your creativity
Yeah.
without demanding so much of it that it dies, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. It's a good point. Oh my goodness. We're so wise. Well, actually, Brandon Sanderson's so wise.
Thank you,
But
Elizabeth Gilbert and Brandon Sanderson.
um, I think another challenge is, and this isn't necessarily like the most prominent challenge for me right now, but is patience, right? That careers are built. And some people luck out and it's the first book and that establishes them. But most of us do not. Most of us are, struggling to
Slow
make
build.
it. Yeah, yeah. And I have 4 books out and I just feel like I'm not getting anywhere. Do you know? And like I feel like in a lot of ways I'm spinning my wheels and I'm like, but you never know which is the book that will hit. And look at all this stuff you'll have. Look at all these stories you'll have for people to read when they find you. But that slow is not, we're not a society built for slow build, you know?
Right, especially now.
Yeah,
I think humans used to be. I think our like human evolution, we are meant to be slow builders
yeah.
in a lot of ways, but I don't think modern society is set up for that.
It really isn't. Sorry, go
Mhm.
ahead. You were going to say something.
Well, so here's my question with what you're going with your challenge, with the patience and the practical concerns. For anyone, I know that you're in the middle of this right now. I'm also, I go through this all the time myself. For anyone listening who is going through that exact thing, what have you done, if anything, that
Yeah.
has been helpful? That like the steps you're taking to step through this? Any advice for yourself
Yeah.
and anyone
But
listening?
yeah, we're giving advice, but what we could really use is some advice too.
Yeah.
We could use some advice.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, I just think, I think that being a creative, I mean, do you know, like they used to have patrons, right? Like that was like in the Renaissance, you'd have a patron, because there's no money to be made in being beautifully creative, because very few of us are actually, what's his name, like Stephen King,
Yeah.
um, but so yeah, I mean, I do think there's always that balance of creative and practical, right?
Yeah.
Uh,
So on like a day-to-day level, are there things that you're gonna try to like get back to the writing and stop that,
yes, I think,
you know what I mean?
one of the things I know for sure about myself is that I work better if I'm not in my house. Um, I
There you
just,
go.
I just find it very hard to get out of the house. It's
Mhm.
like the house is, how we thought as kids there would be a big problem with quicksand, right? You know, it is,
Yeah.
only it's not actual, it's metaphorical,
Yeah.
quicksand. And
Yes.
my house and my family and the dogs and there's the quicksand and I can't get out of here.
Mhm.
But no, I really do think I have to get out of the house. And that is actually my goal starting next week, because we, like, my husband had surgery. So also that's a part of this too, right? So
More of the practical concerns that just take
right.
over sometimes.
I mean, because we're still people, like,
Mhm.
we just don't live in the creative ether as much as we would love to. Although I think it'd
Yes.
get weird to always live there. Like, I think you could really lose.
Well, and then you would run out of stuff to feed the creative ether, I think,
Oh, that's
right?
good. That's a good point. Yeah.
But
Yes.
yeah, I totally get that. And especially like being at home is where all the practical concerns are. So
Yeah.
sometimes you have to like to help compartmentalize, like you were saying, like
Yeah.
sometimes compartmentalization is hard, but leaving can maybe help with that.
Yeah. Yes. So that is my plan. My plan is to get out of the house. And I sort of have to, because I'm now in editing mode for a project.
Mhm.
And I only have till the end of the year to get it in. So time to get to work.
Good luck.
All right, Sarah, why don't you tell us what resource you have to share with us today?
Yes. My resource today is a very practical one that I love. It's Kidlit 411, which is a website, but also a newsletter. But it's what's the word? It's amalgamized. It collects.
Oh, it's sort of a
Like
collection of other blogs and all of it.
Yes,
Like
exactly.
yeah.
So I've signed up, and so you get a weekly email. The first part is giveaways, so you can enter giveaways of like picture books and middle grade novels to, because we all want more books. But then, especially at the end, you get they've kind of scoured the internet for years and years to like bring you weekly resources, everything from how to structure a picture book to how to market middle grade, and it's all linked there in the bottom. So it's kind of a good weekly collection of keeping up with what's going on in the kidlit world. And
so let me ask, have you, because marketing middle grade is it's really, it can be dispiriting.
Yes. Yeah.
Right? Because it's hard to do. Have you looked at any of their marketing stuff for middle grade or?
Yes. And usually it's more creative. Sometimes it leans more towards creative stuff than the marketing stuff, but I always end up clicking on those when they have them. And it's a lot of the stuff that I see recommended that I think just the real core of marketing middle grade is connecting with teachers and librarians and offering resources to them. So maybe we can can of worms that and do a whole podcast on how the heck do you market kidlit middle grade stuff.
Because kidlit in general, right? Because I mean, it's not just middle grade. Chapter books, picture books, they're kind of hard to
because you're not marketing to your actual audience.
Because even teenagers, you're marketing to them.
They're on social media. They will see your book, and even if they can't buy it themselves, they'll be like, hey mom, I want this. But your 8-year-old, your 9, 10, 11-year-old are not on social media. Ideally, I'm sure some are, but anyway, and it'd be weird to market to them to a 9-year-old on social media anyway. Like that just feels a little off. So but anyway, Kidlit 411 has all the like everything from this marketing topic to structuring picture books to writing good characters and kind of just that weekly taste of good writing advice. So highly recommended.
And I know that too. I just didn't realize they did marketing as well. That's awesome. Thank you, Sarah.
Yes. And you have some words of wisdom for us.
I do. So here are my words of wisdom this week. It's from Socrates. Wisdom begins in wonder. Wisdom begins in wonder.
Love that.
I think, so I did this thing recently where I was looking at my core values, right? Now, I do a lot of stuff online where I'm trying to improve myself and understand myself. And so I did this thing, right? And they were like, your core values. My number one core value was curiosity. And I will tell you that I believe that the best writers, the best creatives, and the most satisfied, happiest people in the world are curious people. And so I always believe that you have to cultivate curiosity. You have to wonder about things. You have to ask questions. And you know what? You have to be nosy. I always tell people when I'm like, you want to cultivate curiosity, go to the store. This doesn't cost you anything. When you're at the store, just look at what's in other people's carts. And you start to be like, they're like, that is a lot of potatoes.
Oh my gosh. I have this new dessert that I love that is cottage cheese and yogurt, vanilla yogurt and pudding. But I also eat yogurt like for like parfait. So anyway, this just if someone looked at my cart, they'd be like, that is a crap ton of dairy.
You're like, that's a lot of, she's obviously not lactose intolerant.
No lactose intolerance here.
And someone looking at your cart would be like, why does she need that much yogurt? What is she doing? What is she making with it? And it's really small things like that. It's eavesdropping when people are talking, like again, go to the grocery store and just practice being present and looking around and listening. Like you hear some really funny stuff. Also, though, I've heard the arguments starting, and I like a couple,
Oh,
a mom and kid. I'm like, time to go. But I mean,
Yeah,
like,
yeah, yeah.
and then, but yeah, so let me repeat it. Wisdom begins in wonder. And I just think that's really smart. I think it's very wise.
Love
So,
it. Thank you, Socrates.
yeah. All right. Well, that is this week's episode of Pajamas and Wrenches. Thank you so much for joining us, and we hope to see you, hope you see us anyway. Next week. So thank you. Take care.